Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we'll be reviewing the new SimCoaches Sim Racing pedal set. With hydraulic-based brake and clutch pedals and a true art meets function construction, this pedal set looks to have all the necessary elements to give the sim racer a great experience. Time to put them through the SRG's review process and see how they do. So, let's get to it. So let's take a closer look at these SimCoaches pedals. And the first thing you notice is they are very, very nice looking pedals. Very nice CNC machine done in here. This is just top flight, top end stuff. They definitely took a lot of time to make these pedals. And at the price these pedals come in, yeah, you wouldn't expect anything less, I think. So yeah, everything, you look everywhere, every single edge, anywhere is chamfered, even in the intricate work that they've done inside the lever. Look at that lever. Like I said, it's like a piece of art in there. No one piece is the same, and I'm sure they did that on purpose. It's just a very classy looking pedal, if a pedal can be classy looking. Even down the bottom there where they rounded it off, instead of just leaving a block in there, they put some stylings in down there. So very European type of style on this, even though they're made in America. Everywhere, look, like I said before, chamfering is everywhere. If you look down this lever here, you'll see all the edges there chamfered. I mean, even the edges over here, and yeah, everywhere you look, it's got chamfering on it. It's just one of those things. Attention to detail, right? That's what we're talking about. Now, on the bottom, we have a big 1/4 inch thick plate that's got no less than 8 bolts holding it on. Some slots for our adjustments. Yeah, and we have a potentiometer here. This looks like a very high-end potentiometer. I don't see any branding on it, so I don't know who makes it. But yeah, it just looks like one of those that's going to do the job. And another great thing about this pedal set is the electronics board, which is a nice high-end Bodner board, is enclosed in metal. See that? Because that's where our leads are coming from. And there's a hole down here. You can see way down in there. There's a USB plug. It's easy enough to get the plug in. I've already tried that. But that's where the electronics are hiding. This helps mitigate EMI interference, which is a constant problem for direct drive wheelbases because of the electric motors in them, and even more when we start adding motion with those electric motors. So we're always trying to shield the electronics as much as possible, even though some pedals that cost just as much as these don't even do that. They leave the board sitting outside of the pedals with a piece of plexiglass sitting on top of it. It's kind of silly, really, but yeah, with this kind of money, you expect these kind of things to happen, and that's what we have here. So yeah, very well done. The connectors, we have these nice sheathing on here, braided bits. We have nice metal screw-on type connectors, aviation style, 4-pin leads on them. Again, very nicely done there. We have a damper here that's adjustable from 1 to 8. And that gives us the fluid feeling on the pedal for the throttle. I got a feeling I'm really going to like this because I like those kind of pedals that have that fluid feeling on them. Now, it's not a gas pressure damper. It's just a damper. We're using the spring here to push the pedal back to us. Has a good feel to it. The block that this cylinder is rotating or sitting in and going through, it actually pivots, and you can see we can raise and lower the pivots based on where we want it. Anything you change as far as that goes is going to change the feel of the throttle. So there's a lot of adjustment in here, even though it may not look like there is. And of course, we have the usual adjustments down that are available to us down in there. But again, we'll get to that in the adjustment segment. We also have this easy cotter pin, spring pin type that we can just pull this out, pull the pin out, and do what we want to the block. Very quick change there. Very nice. Let's take a look at the brake. And the brake and the clutch are the exact same pedals, except for the brake has these spring steel washers, which of course we want more resistance for the brake, and the clutch has a spring in it right there. So it's going to be easier, obviously, to push to the brake. So we'll just concentrate on the brake, and the clutch will be covered, right? So we have Wilwood hydraulic cylinders here. You can see them right there. And these are 0.62, which is around 5/8, I'm thinking, for the piston size. And of course, we have a nice banjo connector here. And we have these crush washers, the copper crush washers, so everything stays nice and sealed in a hydraulic system. This is a steel braided line that's going down to our slave cylinder, where it goes up into a T We have 1000 psi pressure sensor, and of course our bleed valve up here. So we can bleed the system when we need to, get some air into it, whatever, or we have to rebuild the cylinders with some seals, that kind of thing, which eventually you're going to have to do with anything hydraulic, right? Yeah, very nicely done here. We have a steel bracket, and this is steel that's mounted to the side of this casement. In fact, you can see there's some screw holes there, and we're actually, I think we're using those, aren't we? Let me see if I can look down there. Yeah, we're using the bottom one and the top one for that bracket. Hard for you to see in the video, but there it is. And again, they've even cut some pieces out of the bracket there to make it look good. Just a great looking setup, really. And here we have the adjustment for the preload on the spring washers. Now these are washers, but they're spring steel washers. And I'll show you what I mean here in a minute when I go through the other parts. So when we're pushing down on the pedal, let me take some of the preload off. They will actually compress together because they're spring steel. I'm going to hold the back of the piece here to do this. So you can see that. See how it moves? And we got some initial movement right here, but that's, you know, all hydraulic systems are going to have that little bit of take up there before we're putting pressure on the piston inside of our cylinder in here. So you can see I've got all the preload off of it, and I have the soft springs in here. So it's moving pretty good. I took the hard ones out already because they were pretty hard, but I might change them back. So I don't know where I'm going to end up yet. But I just wanted to see what the differences were. And I also changed them out when I was doing the section, when I was shooting the segment on the adjustments available on the pedals, which you'll see next. So yeah, just a beautiful piece here. Just eye candy everywhere you look. Everything is just so well done. And we got logos in the top of our levers in here. All chamfered everywhere. Yeah, just beautiful. For the price these things come in, they should be. Now I'm going to show you the base plate. There's an option, by the way, it doesn't come with them. And again, the same theme is continuing on with this base plate. Just beautiful done as far as this aluminum. It's very stiff, 7071 aluminum plate here. It's got a ton of holes in it, all of them tapped. So you get a little look at that of those tapped holes. They're all threaded except for these big ones. We got two big ones down here, 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 and here. And that's for mounting. And we got a couple here also, I guess, so you can do some mounting there. But the rest of them all have threads in them. So we can just about maneuver these pedals anywhere we want to, I would imagine. Of course, we have the Sim Racing Coach logo also etched in there in the machining. In the back, same thing. Just beautiful everywhere you look. Something else, I tell you. And we have this bar here, a heel stop bar. This will go in the front, so the pedals will be behind it, and that will allow us to bump our heels up against it and not hit the actual pedals themselves. So that's what that's for. And we have some holes in here, of course, that line up with these slots in it. And even this thing is chamfered. You see the edges there? I roll it around. You can see the light messing around with it there. Even on the top part here, you see the chamfering on it. Yeah, everything's just so well done here. So this is, yeah, an extra piece that you have to order separate if you want it. But you can mount these just like you could any other set of pedals that has that type of flange system on it for mounting. So yeah, there's a lot of pedals out there that have this kind of thing with the slots in them. All right, so what else do we get with these pedals? We get the USB cable. Obviously, we need something to plug it in, right? And of course, we have the A and the B. No ferrites on this or anything special, gold plating. And it didn't come out of a bag, so I'm not sure who makes this. We have some harness wire, and these will be for going to our sensors. You can see we have a 3-pin plug here. We have a nice rubber seal, so it's sealing out the moisture when we connect it to our sensors over there, the pressure sensors. Yeah, and just nicely done in the same way as the other cables. Nice heat shrink. It's almost a rubbery feeling. And we have the metal collars on the other side. We have one for the brake, and we have one for the clutch. And if you notice, there's 3 coming out of this. So we got brake, clutch, and something else. That'd be the handbrake, and I'm doing a review on their handbrake too, which is also a hydraulic unit that certainly looks to be of the same build quality that these pedals are. And we'll see that in a separate review. So we also get some spring. Let's see, this is an A-spring, clutch pedal soft spring. And that's if we want to take the clutch pedal and make it softer to use than it is, but I'm pretty sure that this is going to be where I want it to be. In fact, I might put some preload on it with this knob. Speaking of which, while we're doing the closer look, I think I'll just show you this real quick. I guess I had some preload on here, so I'm going to spin it a little bit to get it off. There we go. But yeah, everything is chamfered around this thing. See the edges there? It's nicely done right there. And even the hole there in the middle is chamfered on the end. And then, of course, the same thing on the bottom end that you'll never see unless you take it off. Chamfered everywhere. There's a lot of detail. I like detail. And again, you need to do these kind of things to justify these kind of prices. Here's the washers I was telling you about on the brake pedal. They're spring steel, and these are the heavy ones. They're thicker than the ones, and you'll see that in the adjustment segment. And the whole point of these is they're spring steel and they can squeeze together. So we have two washers. See how they're concave on one side? They're convex on the other. So they can be concave. And they're spring steel. So what they do is they stack these with the concaves pointing towards each other. And that leaves a gap inside of there. So you guys can see that in the lights. See that gap in here? Right in there. So when this slave cylinder is compressing and pulling against them, they're spring steel and they'll squish together. Now these are the heavy ones though, so these are the thicker ones, and they're going to be a lot stiffer. I'm not sure where I'm going to be yet. I went ahead and put on the soft ones. That's what it says here on the bag. I went ahead and put those on just so I can go from soft to the harder one. And then of course we have preload on top of that, and you'll see all that in the adjustment stuff. I don't want to talk too much about it here. We'll be talking all day. What else we get? We get some bolts, and now remember, these bolts are all standard. This is made in America, so everything is standard. The hex wrench sizes that you use on the bolts are all standard, like 3/16, 5/32. These are 5/16 bolts, stainless steel, very nice units, and they're made obviously to be mounting our plate back here to a cockpit. But I'll be using M8 bolts because that's what I have for T-nuts. I don't have 5/16. So, but if you have a rig that just needs holes or has holes in it, then you can use that. So you have the bolts and the washers, but there's no bolt nuts on here, if you notice that. I'm not sure why they didn't put some nuts in there, but there you go. The pedal mount fasteners, again, these are 1/4 inch by 20 pitch, and they have a 5/32 head on them. In fact, I have one of them out here they were using to secure this when it came out of the box. So that's a 5/32 size hex, and that's a 1/4 inch by 20 pitch, all standard, no metric here. And I'll show you a flyby here of how this came out of the box. Now I did get the handbrake with this, so I'll be reviewing that again, like I said before, separately, but you can see how this came out of the box and how they arranged it. Nice foam padding in the box, but yeah, you pull this out and put it on the bench. It's just fantastic looking piece of kit. Even if you don't like this kind of stuff, it looks good. I think even people that would say, well, it's just too shiny, I want it anodized, but it just gleams and glitters. I think anybody would be happy to have this set on their rig, but we'll see once we get them mounted. Right, so that's it for the closer look. Now let's take a look at the adjustments available on the throttle pedal. We'll take a look at the pedal face first, and this will be the same thing for all the pedals because the levers here are all the same as far as what we have as far as adjustments, and we'll see that in just a minute when I take this out. Now there are some flathead bolts in here. Remember, this is all standard, made in America, so this is a 5/32 hex wrench size for the actual head of the bolt. Let's go ahead and take those out. Now I've already broken these loose with this wrench because they were very tight, and if they're very tight, it's really not good to try to use your wrist to break it loose. Much easier to use this. So we'll go ahead and pull the bottom one out first, as I usually do to keep it from flopping around when I take the top one out. Let's take a look at this stainless steel screw here. This is a 1/4 inch thread, 20 pitch, and again, flathead, so it fits into the countersunk holes that are in the pedal face. Let's go ahead and pull the other one out. Use my hand down here to catch it. There we go. And then we have a nice solid piece of machined aluminum here. Just gorgeous stuff, as you might imagine. I don't think the videos do it justice, but it's very gleamy stuff. Now, again, we have the countersunk holes here. We have 6 of them so that we can move it sideways, and you can see in the lever itself we have a total of 5 holes. Now if I line this pedal up with these holes, I can see I can come down 1, just one set of holes on here. So it's either going to be at that position, and make it relative to the back of the top of the pedal lever itself. So it'll either be in that position or this position. Interesting that that's all you can do here with these 5 holes. Personally, I would like to see something a little bit longer here, maybe some more holes so we can get it a little bit lower for people with smaller feet. When I was using these pedals, I didn't have any problem. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I like to see more adjustments. Of course, we can move the pedals sideways, one set of holes up and down too, and the same as far as the height goes. Now this, again, very thick piece of metal here, aluminum, and it comes in at 3/8 an inch at the thickest point of this nice radius it has to it. So when we press the pedal, it kind of rolls against the sole of your foot, very smooth, and it is very smooth, by the way. I did like the smoothness underfoot. And yeah, so that's about 9.2 millimeters at the thickest part here. Very nice piece. So now let's look at some of the other adjustments. Of course, we have these holes in the lever itself, and we have our rod end right here, or some people still call this a Heim joint. And we can move this up and down, and of course that will increase the resistance. But it also changes the pedal's travel. And that's also relative to this back aluminum block that we have here with this pin going through it. On the other side, we have this that we saw in the closer look, this little spring cotter pin deal, so that we can raise this pin up and down, and then of course the block goes with that. So right now the travel is, let's take a look here, all the way. See how long that travel is? It actually will touch this back divot, or where the edge ends there on the top of the pedal. So if I push that all the way down, you can actually hear it. So that's as much travel as we can possibly get with this system. Now if I move this up and down, it's going to change the resistance. Not only the resistance though, and the travel. And I'll demonstrate that by pulling this out. Again, I've already loosened this up for ease of display. And remember, when you take this out, be very careful, because this pedal lever has nothing keeping it from flopping forward. And yeah, just watch it. I'll just put a little finger on it there just to keep it from doing that. Take my screw out, and I can move this. I'll just go one up. How about that? So we'll go one up as far as the hole. See, this thing will fall on you. So let's try that again. I can get this lined up right. There we go. Go ahead and run it in. So now when I press it down, it's harder to press, number one. And number two, it doesn't go all the way. See how it's missing now? Or it doesn't go all the way and make contact. So I've actually shortened the stroke of the throttle pedal by doing that also. So there's two things you got to pay attention to when you're raising and lowering this. How does it feel underfoot? And it took me a little bit of trial and error to get it where I wanted to, and then come back, obviously, for this piece here where we make our adjustments on the damper. And that has the numbers on the bottom of it there. You guys can see that. So you can go all the way up to, I believe it's 8. Yeah, goes up to 8, which is very, very tough. You put this down on 8, and it's very stiff. In fact, it won't even move. I'm going over to 7 now. I can barely move it. I'm really not getting any movement out of it until I get down to, I'm going to keep spinning this till I can move it. Yeah, looks like around 3. Yeah, there's 3, and that's pretty heavy as far as the stroke. Yeah, you don't want your throttle pedal that heavy, I don't think. I was running mine around 1 when I was, it gives you a nice fluid feel though, I will tell you that. So it's a nice fluid feel. And of course, on the bench is different than underfoot. When you have a heavy leg pushing it down, it's going to feel a little different. So I think I had this on a little past 1 and somewhere around this, but I think I had it all the way down here so that I could get as much travel as I could out of it. Now we can also change this piece here to change the way the travel is and what it feels like. And that's just, again, pulling this pin out. And that's just a little spring unit there. Very easy to put on and off. And this pin will slide out, and of course the block will come loose. I'm going to, before I do that, I'm going to also talk about this nut on the back here and the nut on the front over here. And I've got them finger tight now, but when it comes from the factory, it's very tight. This is a 1 16th inch bolt. But if you're in Europe and you have these pedals, no big deal, because a 27 millimeter wrench will also work. You see my little 27 here. So that will fit on here pretty well too. And you just loosen it up. And from the back, that'll be counterclockwise, like that. And once this one gets loose, the front one's loose because it can move around a little bit. See how it moves now? So I'll put that up. So I can move these two now freely. So it doesn't take much to keep it. In fact, finger tight. I did it finger tight until I got it to where I wanted it, and then I used the wrench on it to secure it. And there's another thing too you want to pay attention to when this thing goes back and forth is the nut needs to be configured so that it won't interfere with this moving against the bar. See how this block is inside the bar here, this fork. And yeah, you want that to be straight so it doesn't interfere with anything and can move freely back and forth, which actually, let's see, there we go. Now it's free. So it feels different when you do that. If I had it over like this, like I did before, just a little bit, it's hitting up against the back of this, which you don't want because it binds things up. Just something else to pay attention to when you're adjusting this. All right, so now that I have this loose, and I didn't have to loosen this to do this, but I just wanted to show you that. We're just going to pull this pin out. It's flat on this side. Of course, it has the hole on the other side. And you just I just push it in this side and catch it over here. And there it goes. So there's the pin. Nice thick piece of metal. I don't have any issues worrying about that thing getting loose. And the block here, I'm going to pull this forward so I can show you. It has a bushing in it. And that is a metal bushing. It's very smooth so that it rotates freely. Kind of nicely done. It's rounded off at the bottom, which is so it can match the fork bottom. Get this out of the way. You see our bottom in here is also rounded off so that block fits down in there like that. Now you can go all the way down to this bottom hole, but to do that you have to move this down too. See, everything's kind of related to each other when you make a move, which is kind of, can be a little bit fiddly when you're getting it dialed into where you want it to be, but it's easy enough to adjust. I think it's not that bad. I mean, just pulling a pin out in this one nut or bolt rather here comes out pretty easy, and you just leave it finger tight until you get where you want, and then you can tighten everything back down. At least that's the way I did it, and I ended up with it in the middle. But as you change this also, let's say I put it on the top one here, and it's a tight fit, so you can just jiggle it around a little bit, it'll go in. All right, so now I'm up here high. Let me just snug these up a little bit. And now when I push on it, it's easier to push than it was down here. But also, you can see my stop doesn't go all the way down anymore. So I've also adjusted the travel again. So again, it's all kind of relative to each other. And yeah, I found that out when I was working with it. I said, well, I can do this, I can do this. So I was really going for feel first, and then I worried about the travel later and started messing around with how I wanted that to do. Now, let's say I want to adjust the lever itself as far as angle goes. And that's pretty simple too. It, again, relies on these two nuts on this hydraulic cylinder. You loosen them up, and now I could make this hydraulic cylinder go back or forwards. So that is how we adjust the angle. Get the angle I want, spin the nut back up, and get them in the right orientation. Again, on the back here to make sure that I don't catch on anything or I'm not binding. And I'll turn that by loosening this up a little bit, and I can turn that in the position I want it, then hold that while I'm tightening the front part here. The front doesn't matter because it never goes that far. So as I hold it and snug it up, then I make sure that any movement it has, and of course in this setting though, it doesn't really matter because see how high it is? It doesn't really get to the point where it's hitting the back in its regular stroke. Right. So this is how we adjust angle, feel, as far as the travel. It kind of all relates to each other. And that's just one thing. Once you get the mindset that that's what is going on here, and it's easy enough to get the adjustment that you want. Or maybe I just got lucky. But here is the easy adjustment here as far as the force goes. So I can put it in one of these and maybe compensate for the travel I want by tightening this up a little bit. So there's kind of a yin-yang thing going on here. You change one thing, it'll change something else too. And then when we're all done, it's a matter of just tightening everything up. This pin goes back in very easily. Just kind of hangs there, and there you go. And this doesn't really feel that bad. And now, because I've moved it again, it's now, because I moved the angle, you can see where it's hitting in here again. So again, it's all relative to what you're doing here. And again, you can fine tune this adjustment once you're fiddling with it and getting it where you want. But I didn't have that much trouble getting it where I wanted. I wanted mine in the middle, and that's really where it comes from the factory too. See if I can get this to drop down in there without. And it can be a little fiddly getting in this hole because everything is machined so well. Maybe if I put the clip down, it'll help. There's a very tight tolerance here for the fit. So I kind of just shake this around and try to get my hole right. Or you can always just kind of look down in here and see where you are and get a lot closer and do it that way. There we go. So that's where I was. I'm going to be using these again, so I'm putting it back where I had it. And my angle obviously was not that far back, so I would loosen this up on the back one, get it forward again. It's more like it, I think. And again, I'm straightening up my rear nut here with my fingers because I know I don't want any interference with that. I'll tighten the front with my finger while I'm watching it. Make sure it doesn't move. Turn that back to 1. And that should do it. Yeah. But you see, now I've limited my travel again. So what I would do is go in and take this off and see what I can do about that by just moving this. I'll put this down the second one. See how that works out. There we go. See if we get any more travel. There we go. See? But now it's easier to press. So I'm going to go back to here and put some more hydraulic tension on it. Yes, feeling better there. A little bit more. Yeah, now it's feeling like I want it to feel, and I'm getting full travel, which is what I want. So, again, it's not that hard to get it dialed in once you fiddle with it a bit, although at the beginning it can be a little bit fiddly and not make a lot of sense to you. And my final tightening would be going back to the back bolt here, or nut rather, and holding it where I know it's not interfering with anything. Even though my stroke, it really doesn't matter because sometimes the stroke doesn't matter. See how it's not coming all the way back to the back of the fork here? This nut is, so it's not really hitting it. But yeah, just holding this while you tighten this front one, and this time I'm going to use my 1 1/16 and just snug it up. You don't have to tighten this thing up a lot. This will be clockwise from the front here. Just a little snug there, and that's going to hold it. Should never have any problem. So yeah, that's where I like it. I think that's where I had it. I think it was more like 1.5, but again, I have to get it back on the rig and underfoot, and that's really where you have to do your final adjustments. But I like the angle now. It's going to match what I have over here with my other pedals, and yeah. So that's the adjustments, except for one more thing, and of course that's the slots in the flanges here, but that's kind of self-evident, I think, as far as moving it back and forth once you put your screws in and you have it mounted like this. We'll see in another segment me mounting everything up. So let's take a look at the adjustments on the brake pedal, which are exactly the same as the clutch pedal, but the clutch pedal has a spring on the slave cylinder where the brake has the washers. So the build is essentially the same. So the quick adjustment here is this preload, and that is squeezing on our washers here, these spring washers. So as we squeeze that, it gives us more pressure when we're pushing on the pedal, and I'm going to kind of hold it back here and see how it moves. And it moves a little bit. If I get my close-up camera, you guys see that a little better. You can see it. The stack is compressing a bit there. Now we always have this bit of movement in the front. That's the lash we have before we make contact with, the piston makes contact with the compression point. And then it starts compressing the hydraulic fluid, and we can see it squeezing the springs then, or the washers. So we'll always have that in there. Now, you can adjust this by moving this rod up or down. So obviously, if we move it to the top, it's going to be harder to push. Down the bottom, it's going to be softer to push. Now, when you do that, though, this rod is coming off angle internally to this chamber in here. So I'm not real crazy about that if you put it all the way down at the bottom, because there's no way for this to rotate, because you want this to be stiff, obviously. Yeah, so I think I would probably leave it in the center and just go with the adjustments over here if I was going to do anything. Now, we're going to do these washers in just a minute, but I want to do the other adjustment that's available. The pedal face adjustment, as far as that goes, is the exact same as the throttle, so I'm not going to do that again. Yeah, so what we're going to take a look at now is the angle of the pedal itself and how to adjust that. It's very simple. You have to take 2 wrenches. We have the rod end up here, and it's flat on the sides. and that flatness is 7/16 wide. We have 1/2 inch nut on this rod here that goes in. This really the rod that attaches to the piston inside. So all we do is take a 7/16 rather, and hold it there while I take my 1/2 inch and loosen this nut here. And you want to be careful with this. You don't want it to slip because it can do weird things. And the reason we're using this to hold the rod in is because we don't want, by turning this, I can load this rod in and the internal parts of it up against the bolt or the side unnecessarily. So I don't want to, let's just save the wear and tear on it by doing it this way. So I'll just kind of split it open. Doesn't take that much. Put these aside for now. And now I can spin this back. Now I still have to get this bolt out of the front of the lever here. And that is a 3/16 bolt. And you will need one of these to break it loose. And then I can use a handle to tighten it back up. But I think I've already broke that loose once. So I can just take my 3/16 wrench and just take that out very easily. You remember, this lever here is going to fall forward when I do this. Let me go ahead and take it out. So I'm kind of holding everything together here so it won't go flying around. Let the lever go forward, let that kind of dangle. And you can see we have this rather large bolt in there because it's taking a lot of pressure. The rod end here, as you can see, is very easy to spin. So if I spin this in, it's going to bring the lever further in as far as the angle. Now you can only spin it in so far, right? You can only spin this so far. In fact, there's the lockup point, which is not straight up and down. That would be the maximum right there. So right now I have it, I think I've spun it a couple of times. What I'm going to do is run my nut up here. Now I've already got my clutch adjusted where I want. So the easy way to do this to get them the same, if you want them the same, if not, you can do them differently. It doesn't really matter. But I just take my ruler and I'll measure from the lip of the boot here in the front part where that nut is. And looking straight down here, it looks like it's about 16 millimeters. And of course, that's assuming these boots are perfectly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up here, and I'm kind of eyeballing it too, and I can see they're pretty darn close. This one can go in a little bit if I can get it to go in. Again, we don't know, right? Well, I did spin it out a few times. So I'm going to spin this back. Out of the box, if you saw a closer look, they're pretty straight up. There it is, 16. So that's dead on it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to tighten this back up yet. I'm going to go ahead and put it back together first so I can get some more support for it. So I'll take my bolt, get my rod end ready to go. And then I'm going to put it back in the middle where we had it before. I'm kind of looking straight down and make sure the bolt lines up like I want it to. Take my 3/16 wrench and we just snug it back down. I'll give a good tighten on that later before I mount it permanently. And yeah, so now my angles should be about the same. And it looks like they are to me if you look at from this angle. It's hard the way the camera's looking at it. But yeah, I'm looking at it. It looks like they're where I want them to be. And still not very far back if you notice. So we don't have a lot of back angle on this. These pedals are made to be set up in a cockpit where you are set up correctly. Feet are kind of almost straight up and down as you present to the pedals. A little bit of angle. But yeah, that's the way these are set up. That's the adjustment we were talking about there. So let's talk about the adjustment that's a little bit more, not difficult, but a little more time to replace if you don't have it set up like I do. So these are, I'm guessing, the hard washers. And remember they gave us a bag full of the soft washers that I showed you in the closer look. All right. So these washers, and I have them loaded already on this because it's going to make them a lot easier to transfer back and forth when I do this. And I'm going to take one off. First, we got to take the big knob off. So I'll go ahead and just roll that off. Again, a very nice knob here. I like the way they chamfer the edges around this. A lot of detail in this stuff. Even on the bottom hole there. See how it's chamfered around the bottom and the hole itself? All right. So I'm going to take one of these off for now. Hold them up. So this is the stiff one, and you can tell, I don't know how well you're going to be able to tell, but one is thicker than the other. This one's the thick one. This one is the thin one over here. So obviously this is going to be harder. And these are spring steel. And how do we use these? They're stacked against each other. That's my thin one. Let me put that one back. thick to thick. There we go. They're convex on both sides, or concave. They're convex on that side. The concave rather sides, you want them pointing towards each other, stacked towards each other. So there's a space in the middle of them. See how that space, that little gap in there? So when you put pressure on these guys, they will squish together. And that gives us that spring feel because they're spring steels. So we have a whole stack of these in here that compress in using. Now, the number that they give you is enough to fill this gap and for this knob to go back on and not bottom out without putting pressure on these. So you want to make sure you don't lose any of these things, is my point. Now, to get these off, you could just keep, take them off. Individual, have a big pile in your hands. But what I want to do is, because I might go back to the hard ones, and I'm not going to be using this wrench again anytime soon. I'm just going to take these puppies and slide them off onto my wrench. See how that works, yeah? Just hold my wrench up to the front of this thing here, and just like that. Oh, it didn't work. Well, I'll get the rest of them anyway. All right. So now that I have these away and off the cylinder, then I have these stacked. So hopefully these will go back on without me messing that up. I actually got them off one time, and it didn't mess up on me. So I'm going to go ahead and try that again. The reason that it messed up on me is because I was trying to get it to where you guys could see it. All right. So let's try it again this way. So I got it just set up there, and then I'm going to slide them on like that. There you go. See, that's the way it's supposed to work. All right. Now I can take my knob, put it back on to where it just touches there. I'll just leave it there for now. And now we're going to squeeze them again. And remember what the hard ones look like. They didn't go very far, did they? So let's see what these do. So again, I still have this take up part. That's never going to change. That's not always going to be there. It's never going to change. So now we're going to, there you go. Oh yeah. See how I'm squishing those? Check it out. Definitely get more of a throw on it. And of course I can change that by tightening this down, which is the preload essentially on the spring. This is just a big spring here. Tighten that down a little bit, and that will, yeah, definitely makes it harder to do. So yeah, a lot of adjustment here. I think I'll be able to find something that I like in this brake pedal by doing this. Or if I don't like it and it's too soft, we can always go back to these guys over here that I'm going to restack just in case. I'm going to have them ready, because once you have these mounted to your cockpit, it's going to be a little more difficult to get these washers on and off, I think. But if you preload them like that, they should go pretty well, and slide them off and get them all. Like I said, if you start losing them in your cockpit, it's going to be a bit of a mess. And of course, I'm just going to do the clutch at the same time. And the only adjustment different from the brake is going to be, this has a spring in it rather than that. And they give you this spring. We'll go ahead and take that out for the sake of doing it. Let's see what we can feel here. Let's see how far it's moving. Any preload on it? Let's see, let's take all the preload off, but just enough to keep it snug. Okay, so it's just kind of touching a little bit. There we go. Let's see how that moves. That's still pretty easy. I don't think I'd ever be using this soft spring. So let's go ahead and take our knob off. And there's the original spring. There's an obvious difference here between them. I wonder if you could put one over the other. It's a shame you couldn't put one over the other, make it even stronger, huh? But it's definitely wider than this one. So it's going to be a little looser hanging in there, isn't it? I think when we first put this on here, go in here, there's no real way to guide the spring, keep it centered. There's no like little washers in here. I would like to see that actually, to keep this spring from going anywhere. Although I don't see anybody using this spring. If that one was pretty soft. Go ahead and put a little preload on it. There we go. And we push that one. Oh yes. That's not much at all. Yeah, I won't be using that. I think something a little closer, or if anything, have something that would have slipped over top of this. Now this one is thin enough or small enough that it fits on the shaft and doesn't move around. So again, I'm not sure why they would give one like that in there. I don't think many people are going to be using that one. So we'll just leave that one. And there we have it. That's the adjustments. Let me get this going again. There we go. Put a little preload on it. And again, this is something I'll be adjusting once I get it in the cockpit to where I want it. But it definitely has that hydraulic feel to it, even when it's loose like that. I'm definitely going to be putting more preload on mine. Let me crank this down a little bit. Yeah, that's getting more like it right there. It doesn't really feel like you're pressing through a pressure plate spring assembly and a clutch pack. It just feels linear pretty much. So nothing real special there as far as clutch feel. All right, gets the job done though. And most clutches, and I always say this, once you're in the rig and running, like doing heel and toe, and you're stabbing away at the clutch pedal, it's very hard to feel that whatever element they put into their design for a clutch pedal, that when you're sitting there, you can feel it like you're pushing through the pressure plate spring. But when you start driving and hammering on it, it all goes away. You're just kind of slapping it. So anyway, but there it is. Both of these guys, the adjustments is available on them, so we'll get on to the next segment. Now we're going to mount the pedals to our pedal plate. A couple of considerations here are how I'm going to mount the plate itself to the cockpit pedal tray. We have some holes here. We got one up here. Kind of turn it so you can see this thing's so shiny. And we have another one over here. And we do have a couple of the same holes in here, but I'm not sure. I guess you could use those for mounting if you wanted to, but I think my pedals are going to be in the way, but we'll see in a minute here. But we have them down here in the corners. These are the ones I'll be using right here, there, and over here. Now we have this little stop bar here so that our heels won't go up against the pedals. And I'm going to lay that, just kind of pre-lay this down here. Remember, it's got the slots in the bottom, so it is a little bit adjustable in and out on the first holes, and see where I'm going to be. But this doesn't give me a whole lot of room here on my heel plate. Let's see what that's giving me. All the way, if I push it all the way back, that's about 70, almost 80 millimeters, or a little hair over 3 inches, about 3 1/8 as far as inches go. Now I'm going to go ahead and put my throttle up here. Now I'm setting this up for a heel and toe shifting. And again, I'm watching my hole over here, my mount hole, so I know where I want to be. So I want this to be over 1. Yeah, there. That's where I want it to be. And remember, we do have slots in all these pedals, obviously, on the mounting flanges here. So we do have some room to move them frontwards and backwards. But laterally, we just have the holes, all these holes to, you have to, instead of just slots. So let's move this over to these guys. That looks pretty good. In fact, I could move that back a bit. That's my limit of going back. So my bar could go up a little bit. I'm going to move it to the second set of holes. Now the brake's a little longer, so that's the one that's going to determine where I'm going to be as far as where this bar is going to be. Now I want my brake to be kind of close because, again, I'm setting this up for heel toe. I want this to be kind of close for pressing on the brake pedal and being able to swing the shoe over. Got a shoe here. Over and catch the bottom as I do my downshifting, right? Slapping the throttle there. And this is a size 9 shoe, by the way. If you're trying to get any scale here, what I'm going to be using. Now that's pretty close. I'm going to pull this over one more set of holes here. Look at that. I think that's probably close enough. Again, it's easy enough to adjust this once I have these on the actual tray that I'm going to be mounting them to. Just take the screws out and move it over one which way or the other. I don't know. What do you guys think? We have about, because it's not a slot, they're giving us, I think it was 17 millimeters on the spacing here on these screw holes. Yeah, about 17 mil, or looks to be almost 3/4 of an inch, maybe right on 3/4 of an inch of space between the centers on these holes here. So that's how much I have to move it to get the whole thing to shift over. But that's going to be kind of close. Let's see. I don't know. I think I can use that. All right, I'm going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to bring the clutch in. The clutch is not as important, obviously, because it's only going to be a left foot pedal. But I am going to look down here and check my hole. Make sure I'm not covering anything up down there. And I'm going to, let's see, if I move this back, I think it's going to cover my hole, isn't it? Let's see, that's as far as I can come back without covering my hole and still be able to get in here and tighten it down. It's going to be close. All right. So now I really know what I can do with this bar here. I can come into the third hole, it looks like. Yep. It'll reach the third hole. Just like that. Now that gives me a bit more room here for my heel, even though I probably don't need this much. 3 3/4 of an inch or 95 millimeters. So that's how much room I have there, which is going to be plenty for me to be able to rest my heel on here, because it's not going to be straight up and down when I do my feet. See if I can turn this sideways a little bit so you guys see what I'm talking about. Usually your foot's, even though you could be sitting like this, your foot's still going to have a little bit of angle, obviously, to be able to articulate on your ankle joint there. And this is almost too high for my foot. Here's the ball of my foot right in here. And it's going to be, I'm going to actually have to pick this up a little bit to use it, which is really not going to really do anything, I don't think. Yeah, I think that'd be all right. Maybe if they had some more room there to adjust that, it'd be nice. So I think that's what we're going to do. Pretty easy once you have it all mocked up. And I'm looking down, making sure I'm not covering any mounting holes. Everything looks rock solid there. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and install all of our 1/4 inch 20 pitch thread stainless steel bolts. I need 3 for the bar, and I'm going to need 4 for each one of these. And we've got enough of those in here to do that. So when we come back, I'll have it finished as far as mounting, and then we'll go over and take a look at what we're going to do as far as mounting it to our pedal tray. So our SimCoaches pedals are now mounted, and we have them mounted to a SimLab P1X pedal tray. A very solid unit indeed. So we should be able to get all the tactile feedback these pedals can give us. And I used some button head flanged M8 bolts here to attach it. Here in the back, of course, we have one over there, and we'll see the other one as we go around the other side. These are much bigger than M8 as far as the holes go. So I wanted to either put a washer or use a flange, and I had these sitting around, so I decided to use those. Yeah, and everything looks good here. Very, very good looking pedal set. It's very space age, like I said. It just looks good sitting in the cockpit. Now, cable management, remember we have one of these hanging loose for the handbrake, and I'll be doing a review on that later, so we'll be using it. And then we have the USB cord obviously coming out here, and I'll be plugging that into the computer behind us. And we have our connectors just kind of sitting here. This is okay for now. I think I might be testing some motion systems with this pedal set too, and I might just change this and maybe Velcro them to or zip tie them to this steel cable, or just let them hang up. I'll just have to figure it out. I do have some room, I think, in these holes back here. See, you can see some air down in there. Some air. I might run some zip ties through there or something. But right now I just have them sitting over here on the bleeder valve. Just kind of sitting around there so they're out of the way of our spring down here, and just, yeah, neatly tucked out of the way. So everything's ready to go here. Go ahead and walk around to the other side here. You can see where this other little tight on the clearance here for this bolt, but I could still get in there. I used one of my smaller hex wrenches and it worked out fine. So I've already got them set up to where I think I'm going to have them as far as tension. I've been testing them, just seeing how they felt underfoot when I was just kind of practicing my heel and toe. But we'll know for sure once we get in and drive it. And that's what we're going to do next. So we are at Sebring and iRacing in the Lotus 79, doing some heel and toe shifting. And again, this is a very good way to test a set of pedals, I think, because if they have any weaknesses to show you, then they will normally do it when you are doing this kind of shifting, because you're using all 3 pedals at the same time, and I'm putting a lot of pressure on them here. I'm pounding on him pretty good. If you notice, we'll talk about the brake pedal first. I was able to get the brake pedal dialed into my liking to where I could be very consistent in my threshold braking and my trail braking when I'm setting up for turn entry. And yeah, it worked pretty well there. I was able to use the preload to get that to feel right. And if you watch here, you'll see that the brake pedal is not moving that much as far as when I'm pressing hard when I'm coming up to a stop like here. You can see that, yeah, that's about the max there when I was stepping on it there. I like to have a little movement in my brake pedal, not a lot. Of course, that depends on the car too. But in this car, not a lot of movement because they didn't have any power brakes on them. But I have to have something to move under my foot, not just a brick wall to press on just using pressure, because I just have trouble keeping control of the car in braking zones when I have that kind of a setup. But I was able to dial this brake pedal in to be very good as far as what I felt I could do as far as handling the car and keeping it under control, which is not the easiest car to keep under control when you're driving it hard like this. Now, the throttle pedal, as you can see, I have it pressed all the way forward here, and there's a lot of reach in this throttle pedal at this position, so I was able to get it where I could modulate very well. If you watch some of the driving here, you'll see that I'll come off the pedal sometimes in turns and then give it a little more, and I might even come off again. So it's easy to modulate this car. It has a lot of power. It's a light car, so you can spin it out pretty easily in turns if you aren't smooth on the throttle. And this gave me just that silky smooth feel that I wanted to feel. And the damper they have on this hydraulic damper, has a lot to do with that. It just gives you that, as you're squishing that hydraulic fluid out of the damper when you're pressing on it. Depending on the setting you have, it'll be easier or harder to do that. But I was able to dial that in where it felt I knew what the car was doing when I was giving it some acceleration or when I coming off the accelerator pedal. And that's the important thing, I think, to get from all this stuff. The clutch, well, I'm just kind of stabbing away at it, and it just feels like a pedal that I'm stabbing at. And that's typical with clutches in a heel and toe situation on any sim racing pedals that I've ever driven. So nothing special there, but it does get the job done. Now, of course, we're over in the ring, and we are in the Ferrari 488 for some regular left foot braking. And there's enough, I don't have it moved over. If I was going to be doing this all day long, I might move the pedal face over, or the pedal itself and the pedal face, to get a little more off to the left if I was just going to be doing left foot braking throughout a race or something. But this is actually the heel and toe setup too. But what I wanted to point out here is even in this setup where they're very close together, I didn't have any problems modulating the brake pedal and controlling the car in high speed situations like in that corner there where it's kind of almost sliding off to the left as you're coming around that corner real hard off that hill where you get all that air and it gets very light. When you land, in that section, it's very easy to get sideways there if you're going too fast. So, left foot braking, no problems here. I was able to modulate everything the way I thought the car should be behaving. And that's the main thing, is being consistent with the brake pedal. And this pedal being hydraulic, is just another way to have a pressure-based pedal. It certainly feels a lot different than a load cell based pedal with rubber bumpers in there, and you can change out for different stiffness feeling. Here we're using a preload for that stiffness adjustment, and I can go either way here as long as it is a pressure based pedal is the important part, and it does a good job here. I was able to get it dialed in, and that's the most important thing. If I found a brake pedal where I just didn't feel comfortable with it and I couldn't get it dialed in right, I would definitely tell you about it, because I'm not that finicky when it comes to brake pedals. I'm pretty liberal what I can use. As you know, I review a lot of pedal sets, so I have to be a little more flexible than most. But it does a good job. It's good enough to keep me consistent, and that's really what matters, and keeps the car under control. At the end of the day, that's really all that matters. And again, the throttle's doing a good job here. I did want to mention the brake pedal. It was slippery in the heel and toe driving because it's such a high polished finish on the surface of that pedal face that it was slippery using my regular driving shoes that I use for racing. But when I use the gummy shoes here, my Vans skateboard shoes, I didn't have that problem because they're gummy soles and they're very sticky. But they do have a kit out now that comes with all of the pedals that they ship out now, and it is a type of a grip tape that you can put on the pedal faces if you want to, and that should take care of all that. Final thoughts on the SimCoaches Racing Pedal Set. As soon as you open the box, you are greeted by gleaming CNC'd aluminum bits. Once I had them out and on the test bench, it was easy to see attention to detail is the theme for these pedals' construction. Every edge I could find had chamfering on it. The pedal levers themselves look more like pieces of art than pedal levers. The pedal faces are made from 3/8 thick aluminum plate with a nice radius on them for smooth action underfoot. The finish on the pedal faces is very smooth. Almost too smooth when it came to using the brake pedal with proper racing shoes, but only when I was using the pedals in a heel and toe mode. And for those who want to use it, SimCoaches is now including a grip tape pedal face kit. I also like the way SimCoaches has integrated the Bodner controller board inside the metal casing used in the throttle assembly. This helps mitigate EMI interference if you have a direct drive wheel or a motor-driven motion system. All pedal manufacturers should be doing this. Unfortunately, most of them don't. The throttle pedal was at first a bit finicky to get it to feel the way that I preferred. But once you realize that changing one setting affects the others, you learn to predict how changing a setting will affect the rest of the pedal's throw and feel. The brake pedal, which has a 1000 psi pressure sensor, was easy to adjust, and I was able to get it to where I could threshold and trail brake with good consistency. The clutch pedal, that has a 500 psi pressure sensor, did have a good hydraulic feel to it along its available travel. But like most clutch pedals I've tested, that feeling kind of fades away once you're using it in a heel and toe fashion. It was easy to mount the pedals to their shiny base plate. There is plenty of lateral space available for those who like to left foot brake in comfort. Although I would like to see some way to adjust the heel plate height to accommodate those drivers with smaller feet. I wear a US size 9 shoe and didn't have any problems reaching the pedal faces, but would have liked to have had the pedal faces a tad lower where my foot lands on them. Now these are hydraulic pedals, but I always like to point out that you should not expect them to feel like a real car's hydraulic system. There is just too many elements of a real system missing. Still, they do feel different than load cell-based pedal sets. The most important thing here is to have a pressure-based brake pedal for the best braking consistency you can get. Overall, these pedals do deliver the goods when it comes to everyday sim racing duties. And they are arguably the best looking pedal set I've ever reviewed here at the SRG. At the $750 asking price, I wouldn't expect anything less. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.